Good morning. Yesterday I was finished with my series on the last World Championship between Liren and Nepomnoatchsi. And yeah, it was good. So I'm now looking at the World Championship before that. And I realised that actually I'm not just going backwards, I'm looking at it in a backwards way, because one of the good things about chess is that it's a cumulative effort. Why did Fischer become so much better a player than the previous great American Morphy? Because he'd seen all of Morphy's games and learned the lessons those games had. And each new world champion learned something from the previous world champions. And so, we really should start at the beginning and look at what the world champions have had to teach us. But I'm doing it backwards. That's it. I've committed myself to this plan now. I'm almost as stubborn as Steinitz. I'm sticking to it. Yeah, enough philosophical wittering about nothing in particular. Let's look at the game. The World Championship was played in Astana, Kazakhstan, and in the first game it was a draw. It was a very cautious game where they were feeling each other out, not really huge chances for either player. Reasonable enough draw. This is the second game. Liren has the white pieces, and Nepomnoatchsi has the black pieces. So Ding plays e4, and Nepo plays f6. c4, e6. The East Indian defence, very flexible. It can become so many different things. Good, healthy, sound moves. I really recommend this way of opening against d4. Knight comes to f3. It's called the anti-Nimzo Indian, because if you play the potentially more natural knight to c3, then the bishop can come and pin that knight, the so-called Nimzo Indian. And then the original idea behind the Nimzo Indian was to take that pawn, double the pawns, and work against the doubled pawns. There are other more modern ideas that are available, but that's still a good idea. So he plays knight f3 to make that more difficult to do. So the pawn comes to d5, and we're in an ordinary queen's gambit decline. Ding plays a very unusual move. I'm not saying it's a bad move. In fact, it's a good move. He has some poisonous ideas which he has worked out with his team for sure. And, one of the things that comes to mind straight away is an early g4. In a similar way to Mamadiarov, and how he attacks in the queen's pawn openings. But yeah, we'll have to see what it is. So Nepo takes. This simplifies things greatly, makes it a less complicated game. Doesn't make it a definite draw, it just makes it a less complicated game, easier to handle. He doesn't try to win the pawn back straight away by playing queen here, check, and then taking the pawn. It works, but you're developing your queen first, and that's very anti-positional. Nepo plays c5. He doesn't bother trying to defend this pawn. He's too long in the tooth for that. He knows that often trying to defend this pawn in the queen's gambit, it just leads to trouble for the black player. It's not worth it. So Ding gets his pawn back, and Nepo plays a6, ready to play b5, chase the bishop and put the bishop on b7 and have really good development. So Ding castles, and Nepo plays c6. He delays playing b5, and Ding plays knight c3, and now Nepo plays b5. Why did he delay a move? When he delays a move, the knights come out. Here the bishop has got to retreat, and with the knight having come out, then the pawns here and here have two choices. They can harass the knight, or they can harass the bishop if it retreats to here. Had Nepo played bishop to d2 instead of knight to c3, it probably would have been the same. And then he might well have concentrated on pushing the pawn to c4 to kind of close in that bishop. Anyway, that's, bishop comes to b7 and a4 to attack the pawns. And Nepo pushes back, takes a little bit of space, and moves the queen to a better square. Nepo moves the knight, not so much to put the knight on a new square, but so that the bishop is attacking the knight, and the knight is attacking the knight. He's threatening to win a piece. So Ding takes, and Nepo takes back with the pawn. Brave but sensible decision. He's already thinking, I've got a bishop on this long diagonal. I can get a rook onto this open line here. This must be good for me. And Ding closes the diagonal immediately with e4. He's not risking that. And c4 attacks the bishop, but also gives the bishop less choice. If he retreats the bishop here to hold on to this diagonal, then this pawn is lost. So then he's forced to retreat the bishop to here or here to retain this pawn. And he goes to b3 to retain the pawn. Queen comes to c7. He could play b3, but he just wants to get his queen on a better square first. And just be ready, for instance, to play rook to d1 and put on the same line as the queen. The bishop comes to d2, and the rook comes to g8. He's carrying on with his threat to create a kingside attack. The rook comes to c1, putting the rook on the same file as the queen. Always a good attacking idea. And Nepo, bravely or foolishly, depending on the result or upon your point of view, puts his queen on the same file as the white rook and on the same file as his king. This is a bit like asking for trouble. And he exploits this by playing d3, bishop d3. Can't take or the queen is lost, so the pin is being exploited. So the king moves so that he can move the queen, and then he's threatening to take the pawn, or maybe play the rook here, just give yourself a bit more freedom of movement by moving the king. And the rook comes to e1. Good line for the rook, the central file in a great position. And the bishop comes to f5. Again, pawn comes to s5. Again, he's making the choice a little bit stronger for, trying to get Ding to do something with this bishop. So he does indeed retreat to c2 because he doesn't like the idea of this. And if the pawn is taken, then that's just too much pressure on the knight on f3. Too much pressure. This pressure's got to stop. It's got to stop. Yeah, some of you will know which song I'm referring to. Knight c6. Yeah, he's attacking the d pawn and defending the b pawn. So the bishop comes to b5, g5 even to attack the rook on d8. Nepo just sacrifices the exchange. He knows he's going to pick up a pawn. So he's given up a rook and he's getting a bishop for it, but he's also going to get a pawn. This pawn, for example. So the knight takes, and he takes with the knight, so that, he's threatening knight here, attacking the queen and forking the rook. So the queen moves to get out of that alignment and to attack the pawns on f7 and h7. A clever defense of these pawns by Nepo. Plays f6, threatening the knight. Knight can't take here because it's attacked. If he takes here, the bishop's going to move, and then the rook is going to pin the queen to the rook to the knight to the queen with the rook, and it's going to be lost. So he doesn't do that. He retreats to f3. And the knight takes on c2. And the rook takes, and the bishop takes on e4. And the rook comes to d2, and the bishop comes to d6, creating a battery and protecting this rook. King comes to h1, trying to get out of the trouble, but not really getting out of the trouble. Pawn comes to c3, takes, and he takes, and this is now 2 away from queening. And the rook comes to d4, and the pawn comes to c2, and Ding covers it with the queen. This turns out to be a fatal mistake, because Nepo pushes t5. You can't take the bishop, it's covered by the queen. You can't play here, covered by the queen. Can't play here, covered by the queen. If he plays here, it gets taken by the pawn. Which leaves only, if he plays here, it gets taken by the queen. If he plays here, it gets taken by the bishop. So that leaves only a rook here. But if the rook goes to d2, which is a safe square for the rook, it blocks the queen from seeing the c1 square, and Nepo will get a new queen and pick up the other rook for his troubles. So it looked like he was building up a queenside attack, but actually he was building up to force through a pawn on the other side of the board. A really fine win by Nepo, who now, after 2 games, the first game was a draw. A fairly interesting draw, not really a boring draw, but little realistic winning opportunities for either side. Yeah, and in the second game, Nepo really, produced a good win, and now leads the match by 1-0. Okay, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my videos. Thanks. Bye.